I landed at the small regional airport in Oak Ridge, Texas, just after noon. My boots felt heavier than my duffel bag, even though I had been lugging that thing across Iraq for the past year. 12 months of sand, heat, and patrols had toughened me up, but nothing prepared me for stepping back into civilian life. I had sent money home every month to cover the mortgage on the house I shared with my sister Brianna. I thought I had been responsible. I thought I had a home to come back to. I ordered a taxi from the airport app. The driver, a man in his 50s with a faded ball cap, didn't ask a single question. He just looked at my uniform and gave me a nod that said, "Thanks for your service," without words. The drive took about 30 minutes. Oak Ridge looked the same on the surface. Gas stations, diners, kids on bikes. I tried to relax in the back seat, thinking about a real shower, my own bed, and maybe a hug from my niece and nephew. When we turned onto my street, I noticed the curtains drawn in my front window. That was odd. Brianna loved keeping the blinds open, showing off the new curtains she'd bought last year. The taxi slowed to a stop in front of the driveway. My stomach dropped. 3 bags sat on the sidewalk next to the mailbox. My duffel bag from the army, my old rolling suitcase, and a plastic tub with a cracked lid that I used for storing winter uniforms. For a moment, I didn't move. The driver asked if this was the right address. I nodded, paid him, and stepped out. The Texas sun hit me in the face like a wall. On top of the largest bag was an envelope. White, crisp, my name written in Brianna's fancy handwriting. No "welcome home" sign. No kids running out to greet me, just 3 bags and a note. I pulled off my gloves, opened the envelope, and read, "Megan, we've decided this living arrangement isn't working anymore. If you want to stay here, the basement is available. It has electricity and is weatherproof. We'll discuss rent later. Brianna." No dear, no welcome home, not even love. Just an eviction disguised as a family favor. My hands didn't shake. Years of training taught me how to breathe through adrenaline. Instead of rage, I felt a kind of cold clarity. I folded the note and put it back in the envelope. I walked up to the front door. It was locked. My key still fit, but the deadbolt was latched from the inside. Through the window, I could see the living room, new furniture, new rug, my photos gone. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, even through the glass. No movement. No sound of kids' cartoons or Brianna's constant phone calls. I turned back to the taxi driver, who was still waiting, leaning against his car. "You good, ma'am?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, my voice even. Change of plans. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a number I had saved under Maria, Riverbend. She answered on the second ring. "Riverbend Apartments, this is Maria." "Hi Maria, this is Megan Holt. I'd like to confirm my move-in for apartment 2B today." "Yes, ma'am. Everything is ready. Do you need our moving service?" I looked at my bags on the sidewalk and let out a dry laugh. "No, I've got everything right here." "Great. The office is open until 6. We'll have the keys for you." I thanked her, hung up, and started loading my bags back into the taxi. The driver offered to help, but I waved him off. I'd carried heavier loads in worse places. As I lifted the last bag, I caught movement in the window. A curtain fluttered, just a slit. Someone was watching. I didn't wave. I didn't yell. I simply closed the trunk and got in the back seat. "Riverbend Apartments?" I said. "Sure thing." The driver put the car in gear, and we rolled away. On the drive, I stared out at the familiar houses. I remembered mowing these lawns as a teenager, walking to school with Brianna, later writing letters to her from basic training. I thought about the money I had wired home every paycheck minus what I needed for food on base because Brianna said she was struggling to keep up with bills. I thought about the times she'd sent me photos of my niece Ella's dance recitals and my nephew Mason's baseball games. She'd said, "We're a team, Meg. We'll hold it down here while you're overseas." Hi. I had believed her. The taxi pulled into the Riverbend complex, a cluster of 2-story buildings with beige siding and trimmed hedges. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and quiet. Maria from the office gave me a sympathetic smile when I walked in with my uniform and bags. She handed me the keys without questions. Inside the apartment, the air smelled like fresh paint. A 1-bedroom unit, simple furniture, small balcony. I set down my duffel bag and stood in the middle of the living room. No yelling, no TV, no tension. just silence. I pulled out the note from Brianna and read it again. The basement. Rent. The handwriting curled like a threat dressed up as politeness. She thought I'd come home desperate, maybe begged to stay. She thought she had me cornered. Instead, I had a roof over my head, a steady income, and a lot more resilience than she remembered. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. My last deployment pay had cleared. The transfers to Brianna showed up, just like always. Mortgage, utilities, kids' school fund. She had everything she needed to keep the house afloat. So why throw me out? I made a list on a yellow pad. Names of banks, dates of transfers, questions for my lawyer friend Lucas Grant, who had served with me before joining a JAG office, and a reminder to call Carla Bennett, my old squad mate who handled finance paperwork for our unit. Then I walked to the balcony and looked down at the courtyard. A couple of kids played tag near the swings. A woman in scrubs carried groceries up the stairs. Normal life. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Welcome back. No name, no emojis, just 2 words. I didn't reply. I sat down on the couch, back straight, feet flat on the floor. 12 months of missions had taught me patience, planning, and how to see 3 moves ahead. Coming home was supposed to be the easy part. Apparently not. I flipped the page on my pad and wrote in big letters, Phase 1, Documentation. Underneath, Bank, Credit, Legal, Children. My handwriting looked sharp and decisive. Nothing like Brianna's loops and curls. Through the sliding door, I could hear a faint breeze rustling the hedges. For the first time since landing, I felt my shoulders relax. This wasn't home, but it was safe. Safe enough to start doing what I do best, assessing the situation, making a plan, executing it step by step. And if Brianna thought a basement and a note could break me after a year in a war zone, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. I tightened my boots, grabbed the yellow pad from the coffee table, and headed straight for the kitchen counter. The fridge was empty except for a bottle of water and a bag of apples I'd grabbed from the lobby vending area. I bit into an apple, crisp and sour, and felt my jaw relax. The act of eating something simple helped me shift gears. I opened my laptop again, this time not to look at my bank account but to search for the utilities tied to the house. The password I'd been using still worked on the electric company site. The last 3 bills were already paid, not late, and the name on the account was Brianna Holt Lewis. My name had been quietly removed sometime in the past 6 months. The water and gas accounts told the same story. She'd been preparing for this move for a while, clearing my name off everything. The apartment walls felt bare, but the silence was useful. I opened my duffel bag and pulled out my civilian clothes jeans, a faded Rangers t-shirt, and a ball cap. The uniform went into the closet. I had learned in the Army that sometimes you need to blend in to operate effectively. Once dressed, I sat on the edge of the bed with my phone and scrolled to Carla Bennett's number. She picked up on the first ring. Bennett, she said, her voice still carrying that command tone. It's Holt, I said, back stateside. Holy hell, Meg, welcome home. Everything good? Not exactly. I'm going to need a copy of every transfer I sent home during deployment and the dates. Full records. There was a pause. You okay? I'm fine, I said flatly. I just need the paperwork. I'll get it for you by tomorrow, she said. You want me to email or hard copy? Email's fine. Thanks, Bennett. I hung up and immediately dialed another number, this one for Lucas Grant. He answered with a lazy drawl but sharpened up when he recognized my name. Captain Holt. Heard you rotated back. How's freedom? Busy, I said. I need to talk about the Service Members Civil Relief Act and what happens if a family member commits financial fraud while you're deployed. That's specific, he said. You want me to swing by? Not yet. Just tell me if freezing credit and bank accounts is an option while I sort things out. It is, he said. And if your sister used your name for anything without permission, that's identity theft. You're protected. But you have to move fast before she drains anything else. I'm already on it, I said. When I ended the call, I felt my shoulders square. I wasn't a guest in my own life anymore. I had a mission. I walked out to the balcony. The air smelled like cut grass. Kids' laughter floated up from the courtyard. Ordinary sounds that reminded me of why I'd been sending money home so Ella and Mason could have a normal childhood. I took out my phone and scrolled to Scott's number. My thumb hovered over the call button. Scott was a good man, a bit soft-spoken, the kind who worked overtime to keep his head above water. I had liked him from day one, but he was also Brianna's husband. Calling him now without proof would just cause a fight I couldn't afford. Instead, I opened the Notepad app and typed a list. Contact Bankfraud Unit. Freeze credit. Request Carla's records. Cross-check mortgage payments. Look up kid's school account. I saved the note and put the phone down. The apartment felt like a staging area before a big quiet, stripped down, everything in reach. I pulled a folding chair to the small table and started sorting my mail. Most of it was deployment paperwork forwarded from base. In the middle of the stack was a letter from my bank welcoming me back and reminding me of enhanced security features. The timing was almost funny. I filled a glass of water, drank it slowly, and went back to the pad. Under Phase 1 documentation, I wrote a new line. No contact with Brianna until proof secured. It was the same principle we used overseas. Gather intelligence before making a move. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since the airport. I threw on my cap and walked out to the parking lot. The Texas sun hit harder than I remembered. My car was still in long-term parking at the airport, so I'd have to use my boots for now. There was a diner a block away. Inside, the smell of fried food and coffee wrapped around me. I ordered a cheeseburger and fries, sat at the counter, and kept my eyes on my phone. The waitress, a young woman with a name tag reading Tina, set the plate down and gave me a curious glance. "Your army?" she asked. "Reserve," I said. She smiled. "Well, welcome back." I nodded. Her kindness made me feel the weight of everything I wasn't saying. While eating, I opened the mortgage app. My login still worked. The balance looked lower than I expected. Good news at first glance. Then, I saw the last 3 payments were marked, paid by external account. Not my account, someone else's. I screenshotted everything, emailed it to myself, and added it to a folder titled House. Oh, when the burger was gone, I left cash on the counter and stepped back into the heat. Across the street, a sign advertised, "Free credit report checks." I filed it in my mind for later. Back at the apartment, my phone buzzed with a new email from Carla. She was fast. Attached. All transfers from 15 Jun to 15 Jun next year. Let me know if you need certified copies. I opened the PDF. Rows and rows of payments, each labeled Support Household. Total. Over $28,000 sent during deployment. I saved it to the same folder and backed it up to a thumb drive. The clock on the microwave read 4:17 p.m. The kids would be home from school soon. I pictured them running through the door, asking for snacks, their backpacks hitting the floor. I wondered what Brianna had told them about me. I shut down the laptop, placed it in my duffel, and sat at the table. The apartment was still and warm. I let out a slow breath, the kind we used before going into a building overseas. My hands didn't shake. My thoughts were clear. I reached for the envelope again, the one from the sidewalk. The paper was still crisp. Reading it a third time didn't change the words. Basement. Rent. We've decided. The plural bothered me. We? Brianna and Scott? Or Brianna alone speaking for both? The sound of a lawnmower drifted in from somewhere nearby. I stood, walked to the sink, and poured myself another glass of water. My reflection in the window showed someone who'd been through a lot but wasn't done yet. I went back to the yellow pad and drew a small box at the bottom of the page. Inside I wrote, "Tomorrow, bank branch in person. Ask about signatures." Under that, "Call Lucas for formal steps." Then I closed the pad and slid it into my backpack. The apartment light shifted as the sun started to dip, casting longer lines across the floor. I shut the blinds and turned on the overhead lamp. The room brightened instantly, steady and practical. I pulled out my phone one more time and typed a message to myself. Stay calm, stay focused, collect proof. Then I locked the screen and set it face down. The quiet stretched out, not uncomfortable but expectant, like the pause before a move you've been planning for a long time. I pulled my backpack over my shoulder and headed out of the apartment before the sun came up. The streets of Oak Ridge were almost empty at that hour. A bakery truck made its rounds and sprinklers hissed across a nearby lawn. Moving early had always been my habit overseas. Less traffic, fewer eyes. The bank branch opened at 7, I was there at 6:45, sitting in my car with the engine off. When the doors unlocked, I went straight to the counter and asked for the branch manager. A tall man named Eric greeted me with a handshake. His eyes flicked to my military ID. "Captain Holt, thank you for your service. How can we help you?" "I need to review any accounts, cards, or loans connected to my name and address," I said. "And I need to place a fraud alert on my credit." He led me to a private office. A young teller joined us with a laptop. For the next 30 minutes, they went line by line through my records. My main checking account was untouched, my savings intact. But 3 credit cards had been opened under Megan L. Holt with my old address and a different phone number. Balances in the thousands. Minimum payments made from an account not in my name. I kept my voice even. "Print everything. I'll sign whatever you need." Eric nodded. "We'll freeze these accounts immediately, and I recommend contacting the credit bureaus." "Already on my list," I said. By the time I walked out of the bank, the Texas sun was high and bright. I had a folder of documents under my arm and a new determination in my chest. At 9, I parked at a quiet coffee shop on the edge of town and pulled out my phone. Carla's PDF glowed on the screen. I highlighted each transfer and matched it to the bank records. Every month the same pattern. Money out, nothing accounted for except the mortgage. But the mortgage had been paid by someone else for 3 months. I opened a new spreadsheet and began entering the data. Names, dates, amounts. In Iraq, we called it prepping an intel packet. Here, it was just paperwork, but the skill set was the same. When the spreadsheet was complete, I took a photo of the screen and texted it to Lucas. "Call me when you can." He rang back within 5 minutes. "I looked at your file," he said. "This isn't sloppy bookkeeping. This is deliberate. If she used your identity during deployment, it's a federal issue. You're covered by SCRA and the Identity Theft and Assumption Deterrence Act." "Tell me what to do first," I said. "Change every password, freeze your credit, close any joint accounts, and document everything. I'll draft letters for the bureaus and the mortgage company. We can also file a police report, but you'll need proof that she opened these cards." "I'll get it," I said. "You always do," he replied, then hung up. I sat in the car a moment longer, phone in my hand. In the distance, a freight train blew its horn. I remembered nights overseas when that sound came from supply convoys. It had meant backup and resources. Here it just meant I wasn't alone in moving parts around. By midday, I was back at the apartment with a grocery bag of essentials and a new prepaid phone. I placed my old phone in a drawer and turned it off. The new one would be for calls I didn't want Brianna to intercept. I changed every password I had: bank, email, social media, 2-factor authentication on everything. It took over an hour, but when I finished, my hands felt steadier. I opened the yellow pad again. Under Phase 1, Documentation, I drew a check mark next to Bank Fraud Alert and Freeze Credit. Then I wrote, Contact Mortgage Company directly. At 2 o'clock, I dialed the mortgage lender. A customer service rep confirmed what I already knew. The last 3 payments came from a joint account under Brianna's name only. My name was still on the deed, but not on the payments. When I asked who had authorized the change, the rep hesitated. "I can't give you that information without a subpoena," she said. "That's fine," I replied. "I'll have one soon." I hung up and started scanning every document Carla had sent, merging them into a single PDF labeled Holt Deployment Transfers, Certified. The apartment was warm. I opened the balcony door to let in some air. Children's voices drifted up again, this time singing some pop song. The sound reminded me of Ella and Mason. I pictured them at the kitchen table doing homework, Brianna telling them Aunt Megan was too busy or too unstable to come home. I closed the door and sat back down. Emotions would not help me right now. Action would. I called the kids' school under the pretense of updating my contact information. The secretary cheerfully confirmed that I was still listed as an emergency contact, but noted that Brianna had recently requested temporary removal of my name. I thanked her, wrote it down, and hung up. That small detail hit harder than the bank records. Removing me from the kids' contact list wasn't about money. It was about control. I rubbed my forehead, then picked up my pen and drew another box on the pad. Phase 2, Exposure. Inside I wrote, Approach Scott with evidence. Secure kids access. The clock read 3:15. I stood and stretched. My muscles ached from the flight, the stress, and the constant note-taking. I filled a bottle with water, laced up my running shoes, and went for a jog around the complex. The movement cleared my head. Each step felt like sorting a thought. Bank done, credit frozen, documents saved. Next step would be reaching Scott, but only when the file was airtight. Back in the apartment, I showered quickly, threw on fresh clothes, and opened the fridge. The apples were still there. I ate one standing up, juice running down my hand. I sat at the table again and picked up the envelope from the sidewalk for the 4th time. Reading it now, it felt less like a threat and more like a tell. She had written, "We'll discuss rent later," as if she assumed I'd go along quietly. She didn't know that I'd already created an exit plan months ago when her phone calls grew colder. I flipped to a clean page in the pad and wrote a heading, "Questions for Scott." Under it, does he know about the credit cards? About the mortgage payments? About the removal from school contacts? The sky outside shifted from blue to a pale orange as the afternoon waned. A plane passed overhead, its engine a low hum. I closed my eyes for a moment and listened, letting the sound ground me. When I opened them, the pad was still in front of me, filled with neat rows of tasks and facts. No speculation, no drama, just data and a plan. I gathered the documents into a single folder, slid it into my backpack, and placed the backpack by the door. The apartment was quiet except for the steady tick of the wall clock. I stood, rolled my shoulders, and walked to the balcony again. Below, a delivery driver was dropping off a package for someone in Building C. He handed it off, smiled, and drove away. Normal life kept moving. I tightened the drawstring on my hoodie and stepped back inside, closing the door behind me. My hands brushed the folder on the table. It felt heavier now, but solid, like a piece of equipment you know how to use. I set the folder down carefully and reached for my phone. I walked straight out of the apartment with the folder under my arm and crossed the parking lot to the small business center at the corner of the complex. They had printers, scanners, and a quiet desk area. The receptionist looked up as I came in, but didn't say anything when she saw the military ID on my lanyard. I rented a cubicle for an hour, spread my papers out, and started building the timeline. First, I lined up every transfer I'd made to the household with each credit card payment in Brianna's name. The overlaps jumped out immediately. The same week my money hit the account, large payments went to stores I'd never set foot in. Designer labels, luxury spas, hotel chains in Dallas and Houston. I added color-coded flags to each entry. Red for unauthorized cards, blue for mortgage irregularities, green for kids' accounts. I opened my email and created a new address separate from anything Brianna knew. Every document got scanned and sent to this new inbox, with duplicates on an encrypted drive. My training had drilled into me that backups are everything. When the last file was uploaded, I called the fraud unit of my bank. A woman named Cheryl took my statement. She spoke in a careful tone, making sure she got every detail. "We'll open a case today," she said. "You'll get a case number by email within the hour." "Thank you," I replied. Hanging up, I scrolled through my phone contacts until I reached Scott's name. I stared at it for a long time, thumb resting on the screen. Talking to him too soon could backfire. But if he really didn't know about any of this, he deserved to be warned. I closed the contact without calling and wrote another note in my pad. "Prepare packet for Scott. Evidence only." And back at the apartment, I opened my laptop and searched public records for Brianna's name. She'd taken her husband's last name years ago, but still used our maiden name for some accounts. Several credit inquiries appeared under both names, mostly department stores. One line made me stop. An application for a personal loan, listing me as a co-borrower. The date was 6 months into my deployment. The loan had been denied, but the application alone was enough to show intent. I printed the record and slid it into the folder. My phone buzzed. A text from Lucas. "Draft letters ready. Want me to file police report?" "Not yet," I typed back. "Need to secure access to kids first." I stood and stretched. The walls of the apartment seemed closer now, but not in a bad way, more like a command post filling with intel. At noon, I grabbed my car from airport parking. Driving it felt strange after so long in armored trucks. I went to a copy shop and made 2 sets of everything. One for me, one for Lucas. Then I stopped at a notary to have my signature verified on a fraud affidavit. The woman behind the counter raised her eyebrows at the stack of papers but stamped them without comment. The errands kept me moving until late afternoon. When I finally sat down again in the apartment, the sky outside was turning gold. I poured a glass of water and looked at the folder now thicker with evidence. The plan on my yellow pad was nearly all checked off. I opened the school's website with the login I'd been using for years. Still worked. Lunch balances, field trip fees, all paid by me before I left. I clicked on Emergency Contacts. My name had been marked inactive last month. No explanation. I took a screenshot and added it to the folder. The more I clicked, the clearer the pattern became. Brianna had been quietly removing me from every point of contact: bills, property, kids, while spending my money and building a narrative about me being absent or unstable. I set the laptop aside and went to the kitchen. The fridge door creaked when I opened it. I pulled out an apple, cut it into slices, and ate them standing at the counter. The crunch and tartness kept my mind clear. I pulled the envelope from my pocket again. The handwriting looked smug now. She had written "we" as if speaking for Scott, but the paper trail told a different story. I opened my notebook to a clean page and started drafting a simple statement in plain English. I, Megan Holt, deployed for 12 months. During that time, funds sent home were misused. Unauthorized credit opened. Emergency contact removed. Evidence attached. Underneath, I listed each document by number. This would be the packet for Scott. No commentary, no accusations, just facts. When the draft was finished, I took a deep breath and leaned back. The ceiling fan hummed softly above me. Outside, a car door slammed and someone called to a neighbor. Ordinary sounds of life continued while my own family's story veered off course. I opened my email to find the case number from the bank already in my inbox. I added it to the folder and texted it to Lucas. "Got it," he replied. "This is strong. When you're ready, we can move." I put the phone down and stared at the folder. The anger that had burned in me at the sidewalk had cooled into something steadier. Years of deployment had taught me patience and discipline. I wasn't here to scream or throw accusations. I was here to build a record no one could ignore. I grabbed my keys and stepped out onto the balcony for air. The late light stretched across the courtyard. A boy chased a dog near the swings. A woman watered a row of plants. Their normal lives reminded me why I'd kept sending money home in the first place. Back inside, I laid the folder on the table and opened my laptop one last time. I drafted an email to myself with the subject, "Evidence Packet, Family Fraud." In the body I wrote, "Do not delete, legal action pending." Then I attached every file and hit send. The apartment clock showed 6:20. I poured another glass of water, sat down, and flipped through the yellow pad again. Most boxes were ticked. Only one line remained. Approach Scott with evidence. Oh. I underlined it once, firmly, then closed the pad. The hum of the refrigerator filled the room. I reached for the folder, checked that every document was in order, and slid it back into my backpack. The weight felt different now, less like a burden and more like a tool I was trained to use. I sat quietly for a moment, hands resting on the table, eyes on the closed balcony door. I parked my car 2 streets over from my old house and sat with the engine off. The windows were down, and the smell of cut grass mixed with gasoline from a neighbor's mower drifted in. I watched for a few minutes. Scott's pickup was in the driveway. A school bus rolled up and Ella and Mason hopped off, backpacks bouncing. They ran up the walk and disappeared inside without hesitation. I picked up my phone, scrolled to Scott's number, and finally pressed call. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice tired but polite. "Hey Megan, you're back?" "Yeah," I said. "I'm in town. Can we meet somewhere quiet? I have some things you need to see. No drama, just facts." There was a pause. "Sure. The kids have soccer practice at 4. I can meet you at Pinecrest Cafe before then." "Good, I'll bring documents," I said. 2 hours later, we sat across from each other at a small corner booth. The cafe smelled of coffee and cinnamon rolls. Scott looked worn out, dark circles under his eyes. He still had his work boots on. I slid the folder across the table without a word. He opened it slowly, flipping through each page. Bank statements, credit card applications, school contact screenshots. His face changed from confusion to disbelief to anger. "Is this real?" he asked quietly. "Every line," I said. "All dated, all documented. Everything I sent home, everything she spent, everything she changed." He rubbed his forehead. She told me you'd been acting unstable, that you wanted to pull your support and leave us hanging. That's why she moved your stuff. She said you had another place lined up because you didn't want to live with us anymore. She's building a story, I said evenly. That's why she took me off the kids' contact list and off the bills. She's trying to erase me from your household records so she can say I'm not involved. Scott turned a page and stared at a hotel receipt. This is in Dallas. She said she was at a business seminar. Action. I didn't respond. He flipped to another page. A spa package in Houston, a credit card under my name, a rejected loan. He set the folder down and looked at me. Why would she do this? I don't know, I said. But now you do. He leaned back, eyes unfocused. I've been working 60 hours a week thinking we're broke. She's been telling me the kids' school accounts were low. You've been covering them? Every time she said they were short, I said. He exhaled slowly. God. A waitress came by and refilled our waters. Scott didn't notice. He was still staring at the folder like it might change if he looked hard enough. I pulled out a smaller envelope and slid it to him. Inside were screenshots of the kids' school accounts and the emergency contact changes. He opened it, scanned the pages, and his jaw tightened. She took you off everything, he said. She's isolating you, I said. Same playbook she used on me. You're next. Oh, why? Scott closed the envelope and pushed it back. What do you want me to do? I don't want anything, I said. But you need to know where your money's going and who's making decisions for your kids. He nodded slowly. I'll look at our mail tonight. We left the cafe without a handshake or hug. He carried the folder like it might burn him. Driving back to the apartment, I kept my mind steady. The goal wasn't to convince him of anything, but to hand him facts. What he did with them was up to him. At the apartment, I sat down at the table and wrote a short note in my pad. Scott has packet. Reaction. Shock. Monitor actions. Under that, I listed 3 next steps. Secure my credit further, monitor kids' welfare, prepare legal options. The phone buzzed an hour later. A text from Scott, a blurry photo of a jewelry receipt. Found this in mail, not ours, over $2,000. Another photo followed, a credit card statement with a balance over $8,000. I replied, document everything. Take pictures. Don't confront yet. Okay, he wrote back. I set the phone down and rubbed my eyes. It wasn't satisfaction I felt, but a kind of grim clarity. The cracks were showing. That evening, I drove to a public park on the far side of town. Families were grilling, kids playing. I walked the path alone, letting my steps match my breathing. I had always liked the structure of movement. It helped sort thoughts into action. When I returned to the apartment, I opened the yellow pad and drew a fresh box. Phase 3, Control Access. Inside I wrote, Freeze joint utilities. Notify school of updated contact info. Consult Lucas for next filings. My laptop chimed with a new email. It was from Lucas. Affidavit ready. Police report template attached. You're building a strong case. I saved it without answering. There would be time for that later. The apartment felt cooler now. I opened the balcony door and leaned on the railing. Below, a couple walked their dog past the playground. The everyday life of strangers kept my head clear. Back inside, I opened the folder again and reorganized the papers Scott hadn't taken. Everything left was still backed up. Every receipt, every screenshot, every transfer. I closed it, set it on the table, and poured a glass of water. My phone buzzed again, another text from Scott. There's more mail. Credit cards I've never seen. Should I cancel them? Freeze accounts, I typed back. Call the banks tomorrow. Change passwords. Done, he replied. I placed the phone face down and stared at the ceiling for a moment. The plan was moving. No shouting, no drama, just facts landing where they needed to land. I went to the kitchen, sliced another apple, and ate it slowly. The sound of the knife on the cutting board felt solid and practical. Then I sat back at the table, pen in hand, and wrote a single line on the pad. Prepare next steps with Lucas once Scott confirms full scope. The page looked clean, the handwriting steady. The hum of the refrigerator and the muted sounds from the courtyard blended into a background rhythm. I glanced at the folder one more time, then pushed it aside and opened my laptop. A blank document waited on the screen, the cursor blinking. I began typing a simple, factual outline of everything discovered so far, line by line, date by date, with no commentary. It would be ready if anyone official needed it. When the outline was saved, I closed the laptop and rested my hands flat on the table. The apartment light cast a steady glow, not harsh, not soft, just enough to see clearly. I exhaled once, slow and controlled, then reached for my phone again. I drove to Lucas's small office on the edge of downtown just after sunrise. The parking lot was empty except for his old sedan. Inside, the waiting room smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. Lucas came out from his back office wearing a shirt with rolled-up sleeves. He held up a folder thicker than mine. "You've been busy," he said, closing the door behind me. "I don't like being caught off guard," I replied. We sat at his conference table and compared documents. I laid out the bank statements, credit card applications, school records, and screenshots. Lucas matched them with his draft affidavits and letters to the credit bureaus. His notes were neat, every citation highlighted. "You've already frozen your credit?" he asked. "Yes, and Scott is starting to freeze the accounts on his end." Lucas nodded. "Good. We'll send these letters certified today. It creates a paper trail and stops her from opening anything else under your name. We'll also notify the mortgage company formally that no one is to alter the deed or payment schedule without your consent." He handed me a fresh affidavit. "Sign here, here, and initial at the bottom. This one is for the State Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division." I signed each page carefully. Years of paperwork in the Army had trained me to read every line before I put pen to paper. Lucas leaned back in his chair. "What's your goal? Criminal charges? Civil suit? Custody for Scott? House back?" "My goal is truth on paper," I said. "Everything else will follow." "That's the soldier in you talking," he said with a small smile. "All right, we'll do this by the book." When I left his office, a stack of certified letters sat ready for the post office. The morning air felt cool on my face. I drove straight to the post office, mailed every envelope with tracking numbers, and kept the receipts in my folder. Then I went to a local copy shop and scanned each stamped envelope for my records. By late morning, I was back at the apartment. Scott had sent another text overnight, photos of more credit card mailers and a store account he'd never heard of. I replied with a short instruction: "Keep all envelopes sealed, take photos, don't confront yet." I set my phone on the counter and opened my laptop. A spreadsheet filled the screen with rows of transactions. I added the new items Scott had sent. Red cells for unauthorized charges grew like a rash across the page. Next, I opened a new tab and went to the county property records. My name was still on the deed as primary owner. Brianna had tried to file a modification of occupancy form, but it had been rejected for missing signatures. I downloaded the rejection notice and added it to the folder. I stood and stretched. The apartment felt like a war room now. Maps replaced by spreadsheets, intel reports replaced by bank statements. The prepaid phone rang. It was Scott. His voice was low and tense. "She's out running errands. I went through the mail drawer. There are 4 cards in your name, 2 maxed out, 2 still open. She's been paying minimums from my account without telling me." "Photograph everything," I said. "Front and back, then put it all back exactly where it was." I did. "What about the kids? She's been talking about moving them to a private school." "Oh, what? Hold off on any changes until we've got everything documented," I said. "I'm filing with the credit bureaus and the mortgage company. Once the freeze is in place, she can't open new credit under my name. We'll handle the rest step by step." Scott exhaled audibly. "Okay, I'm with you." "Good," I said. I hung up and wrote another note in my pad. Scott cooperating, cards photographed, kids' school move pending. The day stretched into afternoon. I made a simple lunch peanut butter sandwich and an apple and ate at the table while reviewing each document. My hands moved automatically. Open file, scan, save, backup. At 3 o'clock, I drove to the bank branch again, this time to meet with the fraud investigator Cheryl had assigned to my case. Her office was small but tidy, a bulletin board covered in compliance notices. She shook my hand firmly. "Captain Holt, thank you for coming in. We've confirmed 3 credit cards opened under your name during deployment. We've frozen them and placed a permanent alert on your profile. We'll send you affidavits to sign for each case." "Good," I said. "I'll sign whatever you need." She slid a stack of papers across the desk. "Also, The mortgage company flagged a payment discrepancy. Because you're the primary on the deed, you can request a full audit. I signed the affidavits and requested the audit on the spot. When I returned to the apartment, the sun was low. I placed the new affidavits into the folder and backed them up on my drive. Then I sat down with my yellow pad and ticked off another set of boxes. Certified letters sent. Bank fraud affidavit signed. Mortgage audit requested. I flipped to a clean page and wrote at the top. Next, confrontation logistics. Underneath, public place, witnesses, facts only. I leaned back in my chair. Through the balcony door, the courtyard was bathed in orange light. A neighbor carried groceries upstairs. Someone's dog barked twice and then fell silent. I stood, went to the kitchen, and poured a glass of water. The cold hit the back of my throat and grounded me. On the counter lay my phone, a new text from Scott. She's asking weird questions about my bank account passwords. Should I change them? Yes. I tipped back. Immediately. New passwords. Don't share. Done, he replied. I set the phone down and went back to the table. The folder of evidence sat in front of me, thicker than it had been that morning. My handwriting on the yellow pad was sharp, each line a small piece of control regained. I opened the laptop and drafted a short factual statement for Lucas summarizing the day's progress. Bank action complete, credit frozen, affidavit signed, mortgage audit underway, Scott documenting mail. I sent it with the subject line, status update, Holt. Closing the laptop, I rested my hands flat on the table. The hum of the refrigerator blended with faint voices from the courtyard. Everything around me looked ordinary, but the paper in front of me told a different story. I stacked the documents neatly, slid them into the folder, and placed it beside my backpack. Then I took a slow breath, rolled my shoulders back, and looked at the balcony door as the last of the sunlight edged across the floor. I parked across from the grocery store on a Saturday afternoon and sat for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel. The folder of documents lay zipped inside my backpack on the passenger seat. I had chosen this place carefully, bright daylight, plenty of people, security cameras, no shouting matches behind closed doors, just facts. When I stepped out of the car, the heat of the asphalt rose through my boots. I slung the backpack over my shoulder and walked inside, picked up a basket, and moved through the aisles like any other shopper. I filled it with bread, milk, and a bag of apples, things I could actually use later. My heartbeat stayed steady. Years of patrols had trained me for controlled breathing under stress. As I approached the checkout, I spotted her near the front window. Brianna stood stiffly by a row of carts, sunglasses on, hair pulled back. She wasn't looking at the produce or the magazines, she was waiting. I paid for my groceries, thanked the cashier, and pushed the cart toward the exit. When I reached the parking lot, she stepped out from behind a pillar. "You've been busy," she hissed, voice low but sharp. "I can't believe you're poisoning Scott against me after everything I've done for that family." I kept my tone even. "Step away from the cart. You're making a scene." She moved closer instead. "Don't play innocent. You think you're going to waltz back from deployment and take over? Not happening. I've been holding this house together while you were off playing soldier." I stopped and faced her fully. People were already glancing over. Holding it together by opening credit in my name? By removing me from the kids' records? Her mouth tightened. "You're delusional." I reached into my backpack, pulled out a single envelope, and held it out. "This is a copy of the bank's fraud case file. 3 cards opened under my name while I was deployed. Dates, balances, signatures, all documented." She didn't take it. "Fabricated. You're desperate for attention." Then explain the personal loan application listing me as co-borrower. Denied by First Midland Bank, March 10th, last year. Explain the store accounts, the mortgage modification form you filed without my signature. Her sunglasses slipped slightly down her nose. She pushed them back up, but her hands trembled. A middle-aged man with a grocery bag slowed as he passed us. A younger woman with a stroller stopped near the cart corral. The air between Brianna and me felt charged. "I don't owe you an explanation," she said louder. "I've been planning a business venture. Those expenses were investments for the family. Scott understands. Investments don't require erasing me from their emergency contacts," I said. "They don't require listing a deceased man's surname on secret credit cards." For the first time, her voice faltered. You went through my private papers? I lived in that house for 8 years. I observed, I listened, and I documented. She stepped closer again, her voice rising. You think you're so righteous because you wore a uniform. This is my family now. You're just a guest who overstayed. I set the envelope down gently on the cart's handle and kept my eyes on hers. You don't get to steal from me and then rewrite reality. Scott has seen the statements. He's freezing the accounts. The bank is involved. The mortgage company is auditing. This isn't about me wearing a uniform. It's about fraud and about 2 children who deserve honesty. Her face flushed deep red. You can't prove anything in court. I don't need court to show the truth, I said. I've given Scott everything. He's making his own decisions. She threw her hands up. You're destroying my marriage. You've done that yourself, I answered quietly. Other shoppers were now openly watching. A security guard walked briskly toward us. Brianna noticed him and tried to compose herself, smoothing her hair, lowering her voice. This conversation is over, she said, grabbing the envelope from the cart. Stay away from my husband and my children. They're not just yours, I replied, tone still calm. And if you try to keep them from me, you'll find there are laws about that too. The guard reached us. Is there a problem here? No, I said. I was just loading my groceries when she approached me. Several bystanders nodded toward me when the guard glanced at them. One woman even said, she was yelling before the other lady said a word. Brianna's hands shook as she clutched the envelope. You people don't understand what's happening here, she muttered. Ma'am, I need you to calm down, the guard said gently. If there's a dispute, take it off the property. Brianna's eyes darted from me to the growing circle of onlookers. She spun on her heel and stormed toward her car, fumbling with her keys before finally unlocking the door and slamming it behind her. The tires squealed as she pulled out of the lot. The guard turned to me. Are you okay, ma'am? I'm fine, I said. Thank you. He nodded and walked back toward the store. The bystanders dispersed, murmuring to each other. I finished loading my groceries into the trunk, closed it, and stood for a moment with my hands resting on the cool metal. The envelope was gone, but I had plenty more copies. The public mask Brianna had worn for years had cracked in full view of strangers. I got into my car and started the engine. As I drove back to the apartment, my phone buzzed with a text from Scott. She's furious. Packed a bag. I told her I've seen the statements. She left. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I pulled into the lot of the apartment complex and sat quietly, watching the courtyard. Children played on the swings. A neighbor walked by with a dog. Normal life went on, and that steadiness gave me a strange calm. Upstairs, I put the groceries away, set the backpack on the table, and opened my yellow pad. I wrote a single line. Confrontation completed. Scott aware. Children priority. Then I set the pen down, poured a glass of water, and let the silence of the apartment settle around me. I didn't let myself sink into the chair after writing that line. Instead, I stood up, walked to the kitchen window, and watched the street for a few seconds. The movement helped me think. My phone was still on the table, screen glowing from Scott's text. I picked it up and dialed. He answered on the second ring. His voice sounded raw. She's gone, Megan. Took some jewelry, a few clothes, and about $300 in cash. Left just after I told her about the statements. End of 10. I kept my tone steady. Where are the kids? In their rooms. Ella's drawing. Mason's on his tablet. They don't know she's left. Good, I said. Stay calm. This is the time to secure everything, not panic. He exhaled. I've already changed my bank passwords. What else? First, gather all the kids' documents, birth certificates, school records, medical papers, put them in a safe place. Second, call your HR department and change any beneficiary information she might have access to. Third, photograph every room in the house. If she tries to claim you took something of hers, you'll have proof of what was there when she left. I can do that, he said. Come over? Yes, I said. I'm leaving now. I grabbed the folder and slid it into my backpack along with a fresh legal pad. As I drove across town, I kept my breathing even, eyes scanning mirrors out of habit. The houses grew more familiar as I neared the street I'd once called home. Scott was waiting on the porch steps. Still in yesterday's clothes, hair rumpled. He stood when I parked and opened the gate. Kids are inside, he said. We went straight to the kitchen. The place looked the same but felt different. A little quieter, a little less tense. Scott poured coffee into 2 mugs. His hands trembled. "I feel like an idiot," he said. "All these years I thought she was managing things." "You were working 60-hour weeks," I said. "You trusted your wife." "That's not idiotic." He rubbed his forehead. "The kids keep asking where she went. What do I tell them?" "The truth they can handle," I said. "That mommy needed some time away, and that they're safe. Stability first, details later." He nodded. "Okay." I set the folder on the table and opened it to the new affidavits. "Here's where we stand. Bank fraud case open. Credit accounts frozen. Mortgage audit underway. You've got photos of the cards and mail. Next step is custody protection." "That. Custody," he repeated. "You're the parent who's been present, working, providing. You've got evidence of her financial misconduct. File for temporary custody to prevent her from removing the children from school or state." He swallowed hard. "How?" "I've already spoken to an attorney," I said. "Lucas has a colleague who specializes in family law. We can get you an emergency hearing within days." Scott leaned back in his chair. "God, my..." Ella appeared in the doorway holding a marker-stained drawing. "Aunt Megan?" He smiled. "Hi, sweetheart." She came over and hugged my waist. "Are you staying for breakfast?" "Yes," I said. "But first we're going to make sure everything's okay." Scott watched as I knelt to look at her picture, a rainbow over a house. "That's ours," she said proudly. "It's beautiful," I told her. "Why don't you go show Mason? We'll make pancakes in a little bit." She ran off, ponytail bouncing. When she was gone, I turned back to Scott. "This is why you need to act quickly but calmly. They need to see you steady." He nodded. "Tell me what to do." We moved through the house room by room. He gathered the children's documents while I photographed closets, drawers, and valuables. We found a stack of nursing home brochures in a desk drawer, along with printed emails about waiting lists exactly as I'd suspected. I took pictures of those too and added them to the folder. By mid-morning, the paperwork was secured in a lockbox in Scott's bedroom closet. I sat at the kitchen table and drafted a simple statement for him to use with his HR department and bank. "My spouse has left the residence. Please restrict access to all joint accounts until further notice." Scott read it aloud, then signed. "Feels like I'm filling out a deployment checklist," he said weakly. "That's exactly how you handle a crisis," I said. "Step by step." He gave a short laugh. "I guess you've done this before." "Different theater," I said. "Same principles." At 11 we made pancakes with Ella and Mason. The kitchen filled with the smell of batter on the griddle. The kids sat at the table chattering about a school project, oblivious to the legal storm swirling around them. Scott's hands steadied as he flipped each pancake. After breakfast, he went upstairs to change while I cleaned up. My phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. "Family law attorney ready to file emergency petition Monday morning. Need Scott's signature." I texted back, "We'll have it by end of day." When Scott came down, he looked more composed. He signed the petition paperwork and gave me the necessary identification copies. I scanned them on my phone and sent them to Lucas immediately. Next, we called the children's school. Scott asked that all pickup authorizations be restricted to himself and me until further notice. The secretary confirmed the change. I jotted the time and name of the person who handled the call. The day passed in tasks like that, methodical, documented. Each step was a small piece of control reclaimed. By late afternoon, the living room looked like a command post. Papers sorted, phone numbers on sticky notes, photos uploaded. Scott sat on the couch with Mason curled against him watching a cartoon. Ella colored on the floor. I closed my folder and took a slow sip of water. "You're in a strong position now," I said quietly. "Everything's documented, accounts secured, kids safe." Scott nodded without looking away from the screen. "I don't know how to thank you." "Focus on the children," I said. "That's thanks enough." The sun shifted through the blinds, casting soft stripes across the room. Normal Sunday noises drifted in from the street lawnmowers. A dog barking, a delivery truck downshifting at the corner. I stood and moved to the window. The house, for all its memories, no longer felt like a trap. It felt like a place where order was returning, slowly but surely. Scott looked up at me. "What happens next?" I met his eyes. You keep doing exactly what you're doing. Stay steady. Let the paperwork and the truth work for you. Oh. He nodded again and reached over to ruffle Mason's hair. The boy leaned into him without looking away from the cartoon. I took a breath, wrote one last line on my yellow pad, custody petition filed, kids protected, and closed it. Then I sat down across from Scott, the folder between us, and watched as Ella taped her rainbow drawing to the fridge. I left the children's rainbow taped to the fridge and carried my folder back out to the car. The drive downtown was quiet. Sunday traffic moved slow, and the radio played low without me really hearing it. In my passenger seat sat the completed petition, affidavits, and copies of every record Lucas had asked for. My mind stayed fixed on the next step, turning all this paper into a legal shield around Scott and the kids. Lucas's family law colleague, Denise Rhodes, had agreed to meet us even though it was technically her day off. Her office was in an old brick building across from the county courthouse. The waiting room smelled of fresh paint and coffee. A receptionist waved me through to a glass-walled conference room. Denise stood as I entered, mid-40s, steady eyes, dark blazer. "Captain Holt," she said, shaking my hand firmly. Lucas filled me in. "Let's go over everything." Scott arrived a few minutes later, looking tired but determined. We sat at the long table while Denise spread out a legal pad and a digital recorder. "We'll do this methodically," she said. "First, the emergency custody petition. Second, a temporary restraining order to keep her from removing the children or accessing finances. Third, a notice of intent to seek full custody citing fraud, abandonment, and endangerment." Scott nodded. "I'll sign whatever you need." "Not whatever," Denise corrected gently. "Exactly what we need." I opened the folder and slid the most relevant documents across the table: credit card statements, school record changes, nursing home brochures, photos of the mail. Denise flipped through them quickly but thoroughly. "This is gold," she said. "Dates, amounts, signatures. Judges love paper trails." She asked Scott to describe, in plain language, what had happened since Brianna left. He spoke steadily, eyes on the table. Denise typed as he talked, occasionally asking for clarification. When he finished, she turned to me. "And you're willing to submit a sworn statement corroborating these facts?" "Yes," I said. "Everything is documented." "Good." She printed 2 forms on the office laser printer and slid them to Scott. "These are for the emergency custody request. Sign and date. This will allow the court to schedule a hearing within 48 hours. Given the evidence, I'm confident we'll get a temporary order immediately." Scott signed, his hand only shaking slightly. I signed my own affidavit confirming the financial evidence and the removal from emergency contacts. Denise notarized both right there at the table. Next, she opened a new file on her laptop. "Now, the restraining order. This isn't about punishing her. It's about preventing sudden moves, pulling the kids out of school, draining bank accounts, or removing property. It will also restrict her from contacting you in a threatening manner." Scott hesitated. "Will this make things worse?" Denise's tone stayed calm. "It creates clear boundaries. That often prevents escalation. You're not accusing her of violence. You're requesting standard protective measures for the children and assets." He exhaled and nodded. "Do it." She drafted the petition on the spot, referencing each exhibit number I'd prepared. Within half an hour, she had a neat stack of filings ready for the courthouse clerk. "We'll walk these across the street right now," she said. "Clerk's office is open until 2. The 3 of us left the office together, crossed the sun-baked street, and entered the courthouse. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of floor wax. We passed through a metal detector and up to the clerk's window. Denise handed over the petitions with practiced efficiency. The clerk stamped each page with a heavy thunk. "Your emergency hearing is set for tomorrow morning at 9, the clerk said. "Judge Hayes, here's your docket number." "That." Denise thanked her, took the stamped copies, and handed one set to Scott. "You'll both appear," she said. "Megan, your affidavit is already in the file. All you need to do is be available for questions." Scott stared at the papers in his hands. "Tomorrow morning," he murmured. "Yes," Denise said. "The system moves fast in emergencies." We walked back out into the sunlight. Scott looked at me. "I don't know how you're keeping so calm." "Training," I said. "One task at a time." Back at his house, The kids were in the backyard with the neighbor's teenage daughter who sometimes babysat. Scott thanked her and sent her home with cash. Then he closed the back door and leaned against it. "They've been asking again," he said softly. "I told them Mommy had to go on a trip." "That's fine," I said. "We'll keep it simple until there's something official to explain." He rubbed his face. "What if she shows up tonight?" "Then you call the police and show them the stamped petition," I said. "It puts you on solid ground until the hearing." He nodded slowly. "Okay." I sat at the kitchen table and pulled out my yellow pad. Under Next Steps, I wrote, "Prepare for hearing. Bring originals of all exhibits. Support Scott with kids present." Scott poured himself water and sat across from me. "Do you think the judge will believe me?" "The judge will believe the documents," I said. "Your job is to stay steady and answer questions honestly." His shoulders relaxed a little. "You make it sound simple." "It isn't simple," I said. "It's clear." He gave a faint smile. "Clear I can do." We spent the next hour organizing everything for court. I labeled each exhibit with a number and a sticky note. Scott rehearsed answering basic questions when he discovered the cards: how long Brianna had been gone, what steps he'd taken to secure the children. Ella wandered in with a book and climbed onto my lap. "Aunt Megan, are you going to sleep over?" "Maybe tonight," I said. "Would you like that?" She nodded solemnly. "It's quiet when you're here." I hugged her lightly. "I like being here too." Mason appeared at the doorway holding a toy tank. "Look what I built," he said. "That's awesome," I told him. "You're good at building things." He grinned and ran off again. When the kids were occupied, Scott lowered his voice. "If she fights this, will they still let me keep the kids?" "You're their primary caregiver right now," I said. She left voluntarily. "Judges look at stability first. You're stable. You have evidence. Focus on that." He nodded, eyes clearer now. The afternoon drifted into evening with the calm rhythm of preparation papers stacked, kids fed, bedtime routine followed. Scott read them a story while I washed dishes. The house felt lighter without the constant tension of Brianna's criticism. After the children were asleep, Scott and I sat at the kitchen table one more time. I slid the neatly labeled exhibits back into my folder. "You should get some sleep," I told him. "I don't think I can," he admitted. "You don't need to sleep long," I said. "You just need to be steady tomorrow. Eat breakfast, dress clean, bring the kids if you have to. Judges notice composure." He ran a hand through his hair. "I still can't believe this is happening." "Now, you're doing what you have to do," I said simply. He looked at me across the table. "Thank you. I mean it." I closed the folder and stood. "Let's get everything by the door so it's ready for the morning." We stacked the petitions, affidavits, and exhibits into a single briefcase. Scott set it next to his work bag by the front door. The clock over the stove read 10:15. I wrote one last line on my yellow pad, "Emergency hearing scheduled, exhibits prepared," and slipped it back into my backpack. Then I poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to Scott. He raised it slightly, like a small toast, and we both drank. The house was quiet, except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a train on the tracks beyond the neighborhood. Morning light filtered across the kitchen when I woke on the couch. Scott was already up, dressed in a clean shirt and tie, a mug of coffee in his hand. The kids were eating cereal at the table, backpacks by the door. Everything looked orderly, not frantic. "You're ready," I said quietly as I stood. He nodded. "I followed your checklist." We loaded the children into his car, my folder, and his briefcase on the back seat. The courthouse stood only 15 minutes away. Scott parked in the public lot and took a deep breath before stepping out. "Let's do this," he murmured. Inside, the hall smelled of old wood and coffee. Families, lawyers, and clerks moved in quiet lines toward various courtrooms. Judge Hayes's courtroom was on the 3rd floor. We found seats near the front. Denise was already there, her laptop open and a neat stack of papers beside her. "Morning," she said briskly. "Everything's filed. We'll be called shortly. The judge has reviewed your petition and the exhibits." Scott sat straight, hands clasped on his knees. I placed my folder on the bench between us. The kids sat with a volunteer from the courthouse's children's area, reading picture books just outside the door. When our case was called, we walked to the front. The courtroom was small, wood-paneled, with a state flag behind the bench. Judge Hayes, silver-haired and no-nonsense, looked over his glasses at the papers. "Mr. Holt," he said, "this is your emergency petition for custody and protective order?" "Yes, Your Honor," Scott answered, voice steady. Denise spoke next. "Your Honor, we have sworn affidavits and exhibits documenting financial misconduct, identity fraud, and attempted removal of the children from emergency contacts by the respondent, who has voluntarily left the residence. We're asking for temporary custody and an order restricting access to joint accounts and to the children pending a full hearing." Judge Hayes turned to Scott. "Is the respondent present?" "No, Your Honor," Scott said. "She left the residence 2 days ago." The judge tapped a pen. "I've reviewed the petition and exhibits. Captain Holt, you've provided the supporting affidavit?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. He nodded. "All right. I'm granting temporary sole custody to Mr. Holt effective immediately. The respondent is prohibited from removing the children from the state, from accessing joint accounts without consent, and from altering school or medical records. This order is valid until the full hearing on the date specified." Denise handed him a prepared order. He signed it with a flourish and passed it back to the clerk. "File this and provide certified copies to petitioner," he said. Scott's shoulders sagged slightly as he exhaled. Denise placed the signed order in a folder and handed it to him. "Keep this with you at all times," she whispered. Judge Hayes looked up again. "Mr. Holt, do you have any questions?" "No, Your Honor," Scott said quietly. "Then we're done," the judge replied. Court adjourned. We stepped out into the hallway. The kids ran up and hugged Scott's legs. He crouched down and kissed their heads, holding the signed order in one hand like a lifeline. Denise closed her laptop. "That's the first step," she said. "Full hearing will finalize custody, but this protects you now. Stick to the order, keep documenting everything, and you'll be fine." Scott shook her hand. "Thank you. Really." She smiled briefly. "Just keep your cool." We walked out into the sunlit courtyard of the courthouse. Scott squinted at the sky. "Feels different," he said. "It is different," I told him. "Now you're not reacting. You're in control." End of crate. We drove back to his house, stopping for coffee and sandwiches on the way. At the table, Scott laid the certified order next to the rainbow drawing on the fridge. "This is for them," he said, glancing at the kids playing in the yard. "Yes," I said. The rest of the morning became practical tasks. Scott called the children's school to fax a copy of the order and confirm the pickup restrictions. He sent a copy to his HR department and to the bank. He also called his insurance provider to update beneficiaries. Each call ended with a note on the yellow pad I kept open in front of him. While he worked, I scanned the signed order and added it to my own secure folder. Then, I drafted a simple schedule for him: mornings, work hours, after-school pickup, bedtime routines. Keeping everything consistent would help the children feel safe and would impress the court. Around noon, Scott hung up the phone and sat back. "Everything's notified," he said. "School, bank, insurance, I even called the pediatrician." "Good," I said. "That closes the loopholes." He rubbed his face. I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I just feel tired. "That's normal," I said. "You've been in survival mode. Now you're in maintenance mode." He gave a small laugh. "You talk like a field manual." "I am a field manual," I said with a grin. The kids came in for lunch. Ella chattered about her art project. Mason showed off his toy tank again. The house felt almost normal. No shouting, no tension, just the sound of children being children. After they'd eaten and gone back outside, Scott lowered his voice. "What if she comes back and tries to take them anyway?" "You show her the order," I said. "If she refuses, you call the police immediately. You're on legal ground now. You're not the one at risk." He nodded, eyes on the signed papers. I stood and began stacking the empty plates. "Let's keep all the documentation in one binder," I said. "That way, if an officer shows up or a court asks, you have everything ready." He fetched a 3-ring binder from a desk drawer, and together we slid the exhibits into plastic sleeves, labeled each tab, and inserted the order at the front. When we were done, the binder looked like a mission briefing book, concise, organized, undeniable. Scott closed it and set it upright on the counter. "This is what peace looks like, isn't it?" "It's what accountability looks like," I said. The afternoon sunlight slanted through the windows. The house felt open and quiet. Even the dog, usually restless, lay stretched on the rug snoring softly. Scott poured himself water and leaned against the counter. I keep thinking about how close I came to believing everything she said about you, if you hadn't documented it all. I cut him off gently. What matters is you see it now. The kids see you steady. That's how you rebuild. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. We both moved to the back door and watched Ella push Mason on the swing set. Their laughter floated across the yard, clear and unforced. Scott exhaled. "They'll be okay," he said. "Yes," I said, "they will." Inside, I wrote another line on my yellow pad. Temporary custody granted, protections in place, binder prepared, and closed it. The page was nearly full now, each item a step toward stability. Scott turned from the window and sat at the table again. "What now?" "You keep following the plan," I said. "Keep records, keep routines, let the truth do the work." He nodded, shoulders relaxing a fraction more. I stacked the clean dishes, wiped the counter, and glanced at the signed order on the fridge beside the rainbow drawing. 2 pieces of paper, one from a child, one from a judge telling the same story, a house becoming safe again. The hum of the refrigerator blended with the faint sound of the children's laughter through the open window. The house was still when I arrived the next morning. Sunlight came through the front window, glinting off the clean kitchen counter. Scott was at the table with a notebook, the custody order pinned under a magnet on the fridge next to Ella's rainbow drawing. The children were in the backyard with chalk and a jump rope. He looked up when I entered. "They slept through the night," he said quietly. "First time in months without nightmares." I poured coffee from the pot and sat down. "That's what stability does," I said. Scott flipped the notebook toward me. "I made a schedule like you suggested. Work hours, kids' school, after-school activities. I even built in a quiet hour for homework and reading." I scanned the page. "This is solid. Kids thrive on predictability. Judges like to see it too. It shows you're giving them structure." He gave a small smile. "Feels like building a base camp." "That's exactly what it is," I said. We spent the morning putting the schedule into action. Ella needed help with a science project. Mason had a dentist appointment. I offered to drive them both while Scott handled calls with his HR department and the bank. The routine felt normal: school drop-offs, errands, lunch at home. No arguments, no sudden demands, no tension. At the dentist's office, Mason squeezed my hand. "Aunt Megan, is Daddy sad?" "He's tired," I said. "But he's happy you're safe." "Are you staying?" he asked. "I'm here whenever you need me," I said. He nodded solemnly and hopped onto the exam chair. Back at the house, Scott was on the phone with the mortgage company. "Yes, I have the audit request from last week," he was saying. "Please send the full payment history to my email." He scribbled notes as he listened, thanked the representative, and hung up. Another irregular payment popped up, he told me. She'd been funneling money into a separate account. "They're sending me copies." "Add them to the binder when they arrive," I said. "Even if you're feeling stronger, keep the documentation consistent. It's not about revenge, it's about clarity." He nodded. "I get that now." The afternoon passed with small, steady actions. Scott changed the locks on the back door. I called the children's school to confirm they'd received the custody order. Ella did her homework at the kitchen table while Mason practiced spelling words aloud. At one point, Ella looked up. "Aunt Megan, can we plant flowers in the backyard, like the ones you had at your old house?" "Sure," I said. "We'll go to the garden center this weekend." Her eyes lit up. "Can we make a rainbow of flowers?" "Yes," I said. Scott smiled faintly at that. As evening approached, I made spaghetti while Scott folded laundry. The children set the table without being asked. Everyone moved easily, like gears meshing. The quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It was calm. During dinner, Scott cleared his throat. "Kids," he said gently, "Mommy won't be living here for a while. But you're safe, and Aunt Megan and I will take care of you." Ella looked down at her plate. Mason asked, "Will she come back?" "I don't know," Scott said honestly, "but you'll always be safe here." I watched their faces. They were sad but not panicked. Predictability and honesty were already working. After dinner, the kids went to the living room to watch a show. Scott stayed at the table with me. "I've been thinking about counseling," he said. "For them, maybe for me too." "That's a good idea," I said. "Courts like to see proactive steps, and it helps the kids process everything." He scribbled counseling onto his notebook. I never realized how much I let slide. how much she controlled the narrative. Most people don't realize until it's too late, I said. You're ahead of it now. He exhaled. Feels like a different house. It is a different house, I said. The children returned with their show over. Ella climbed onto Scott's lap and Mason leaned against his arm. Can we do pancakes again tomorrow? Ella asked. Scott smiled. Yes. Pancakes tomorrow. I stood and began clearing dishes. I'll bring fresh fruit for them. Ella looked at me. Will you be here for breakfast too? I'll be here, I said. Later, after the children were in bed, Scott and I sat on the porch. The night air smelled of cut grass. A neighbor's porch light glowed softly down the street. I'm starting to sleep again, Scott said. Even with everything still up in the air. It's quieter inside my head. That's what happens when you take back control, I said. He turned his coffee cup slowly in his hands. You've been through deployments, investigations, everything. And you still have patience for all this. I shrugged. Patience is part of the job. Whether it's soldiers or kids, you can't build trust in a rush. He gave a faint laugh. You should write a manual. It'd be a boring manual, I said, smiling. The porch creaked softly under our chairs. Crickets chirped in the yard. The house behind us was quiet and solid. Scott looked at the window where Ella's rainbow drawing glowed faintly under the kitchen light. They're going to remember this, aren't they? They'll remember who showed up, I said. He nodded slowly. Then I'll keep showing up. I closed my yellow pad after writing one last line. Routine established, kids informed, counseling planned, and slid it back into my bag. The page looked full, but the space around us felt open. Inside, the refrigerator hummed softly, a steady sound in a house finally regaining its rhythm. The smell of pancakes filled the kitchen again the next morning. Ella stood on a chair stirring batter while Mason set forks and napkins. Scott flipped each pancake with calm movements, not rushing, not snapping. The kitchen window was open, and a cool breeze moved through the room. I poured juice into glasses and watched the scene. The same house that had once felt tense and cramped now felt open. It wasn't about my return. It was about honesty replacing manipulation. After breakfast, Scott gathered the children at the table. We're going to the park today, he said. Afterwards, we'll meet someone from the counseling center to talk about feelings. Ella asked. Will Aunt Megan come too? Yes, Scott said. We loaded into the car with a picnic basket and the kids' bikes. The park was green with early summer grass. Mason pedaled ahead while Ella followed on her scooter. Scott spread a blanket under a tree. I sat down with him, my folder in my lap, even though I didn't need it here. They'll meet with a child counselor twice a week, Scott said quietly. I'll see a separate one myself. Denise says it looks good to the court and it's good for us. It's good for them, I said. And for you. A breeze lifted the corner of the blanket. We watched the children loop around the path, laughing freely. The sound was steady, not forced. Scott leaned back on his hands. I filed the updated beneficiary forms and changed every password. The mortgage company sent me the audit. Brianna took nearly $12,000 out before she left. There's a warrant for her to answer to the fraud case. Denise thinks the divorce will be straightforward. Paperwork takes time, I said. But the big work, keeping them safe, you're already doing. He looked at me. I wouldn't have known where to start without you. You're doing it now, I said simply. We spent the day at the park. Ella insisted on showing me every flower. Mason tried to race me on his bike and laughed when I jogged behind him. Scott took photos on his phone. None of it looked like a staged, happy family moment. It looked like a family adjusting to reality and finding a rhythm. At lunchtime, we sat on the blanket eating sandwiches. Ella held up her drawing from the day before. We can plant these flowers in our yard, she said. A rainbow garden. Yes, Scott said. We'll go to the garden center this weekend. Mason leaned against my arm. Will you help too, Aunt Megan? I'll help, I said. After lunch, the counselor arrived, a woman named Karina with a gentle voice. She met the children first while Scott and I stood nearby. They walked with her to a quiet corner of the park where she had toys and drawing paper. Mason drew tanks. Ella drew rainbows. Karina asked simple questions about home and school. The kids answered without hesitation. They're resilient, Karina said later, handing Scott a brief note. Keep routines. Keep honesty. Praise them for small things. You're doing well. Scott folded the note carefully. Thank you. The rest of the afternoon was spent back at the house preparing dinner together. The children helped chop vegetables while Scott grilled chicken on the patio. The dog lay nearby, tail thumping lazily. After dinner, we planted the first flowers in a small bed near the porch, red, yellow, blue. Ella placed each plant carefully. Mason tamped down the soil. Scott watered them with the garden hose while the kids squealed at the spray. The rainbow garden had begun. Inside, the binder of documents still sat on the counter. But now it felt like just another household item, not a weapon or a shield. The house no longer revolved around suspicion. It revolved around meals, homework, bedtime stories, and small plans for the weekend. When the children were in bed, Scott and I sat at the kitchen table. He opened the binder and flipped through it one last time. It's strange, he said. This binder was about survival. Now it feels like closure. It's still your record, I said. Keep it until everything is finalized. But you're already living the life you want to protect. End 2. He closed the binder and set it aside. I keep thinking about what you said, that some people confuse control with love. She did. I let her. Not anymore. I nodded. You're showing your kids what real love looks like. Consistent, honest, steady. He gave a small laugh. You sound like a drill sergeant, but it works. I prefer coach, I said with a smile. The clock ticked softly above the stove. Outside, a train passed in the distance. Scott reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm sorry you had to go through all this just to come home. I'm not, I said. Coming home and telling the truth saved us all. You did the hard part listening. He looked down, eyes wet but steady. Thank you. I stood and poured 2 glasses of water. We drank in silence for a moment. The hum of the refrigerator was steady, the house quiet. In the morning there would be pancakes again, school drop-offs, counseling sessions, garden planting. The schedule wasn't a performance for court. It had become the real rhythm of their lives. I wrote one last line on my yellow pad: stability established, family routines solid, new life underway, and closed it. The pad was full now, page after page of careful steps from the moment I'd found my bags on the sidewalk to this kitchen filled with calm. I set it beside Ella's rainbow drawing on the fridge. 2 records of the same story, one in a child's colors, one in an adult's handwriting, each marking how a family had gone from manipulation to honesty without losing its warmth. The flowers outside the porch waited for more colors. The house was quiet but alive. Scott washed the last plate, dried his hands, and smiled faintly at the sound of his children breathing softly upstairs. No speeches, no dramatics, just a family finally standing on steady ground. When I think back to the moment I stood on the sidewalk staring at my bags, it feels like another lifetime. At the time, it looked like humiliation. In reality, it was the first clear signal that I needed to act. All the training, discipline, and patience the Army had drilled into me ended up being the same tools that let me protect my family without screaming or scheming. Scott is not just functioning now. He's present. The kids laugh more than they cry. The rainbow garden outside is slowly filling with color, and the binder that once documented every betrayal now sits untouched because there's nothing left to hide. I didn't get revenge by striking back. I got it by refusing to play along with lies, by showing that steady truth will outlast manipulation every single time. This is what real family revenge stories are to me. Not throwing punches or plotting sabotage, but standing your ground with facts, patience, and dignity until the mask falls off on its own. It's proof that you can come back from the hardest places, even a war zone abroad or a quiet war at home, and still build something honest and warm. And if you're reading or watching this wondering if it's possible, let our story show you that it is.